Hey, everybody. Welcome to the March 2022 episode of Fishtrap Fireside. Fireside is a monthly reading series we've designed to feature diverse voices from local writers right here in Wallowa County. And each month offers a fresh look at what people of the West are thinking about and writing down. And every March, we make a point to celebrate Women's History Month by featuring 3 women writers who offer different perspectives and life experiences. This year, you get to hear from Toni Marie Jones, Talia Filipek, and Debbie Carson. The March episode of Fishtrap Fireside is sponsored by Alder Slope Nursery, a family-owned and operated nursery serving Wallowa County for over 40 years. Learn more at alderslopenursery.com. Hey, before we get going, I want to let you know that registration for the 35th Summer Fish Trap Gathering of Writers is open now. It takes place July 11th through 17th up at Wallowa Lake. And if you know a kid who loves to write, we're now accepting applications for young people to attend one of the youth workshops taking place during Summer Fish Trap through our Abundant Scholarship Program. Students entering 5th through 8th grades can spend a week with Dr. Janae Brown-Wood. And for those entering 9th through 12th grades, they can explore their creative potential with Cameron Scott. Go to fishtrap.org to learn more. Okay, let's get to our first fireside reader. A Wallowa County native, Toni Marie Jones is both of European and Native American heritage. Her Irish immigrant great-great-grandparents homesteaded in 1880 on what is now the Zumwalt Prairie. That's the Zumwalt Prairie right over there. Her indigenous lineage comes from Cayuse, Assiniboine, Northern Cree, and Muskego Cree. 2 of her 3rd great-grandfathers were interpreters for the Nez Perce and the Cayuse during the 1855 treaty negotiations. She's a mother of 2 wonderful adults, a fiber and beadwork artist, a wildflower enthusiast to the fullest. Jones is the co-editor of the Frenchtown Historical Foundation newsletter. Her work has appeared in 2 Fish Trap Outpost chapbooks, and she is a member of the Right Women in Sheep Creek Word Herders, local writing groups headed by author, ranchwoman extraordinaire, and cornerstone of Fish Trap, Janie Tippett. Please welcome Toni Marie Jones.
Thank you. I have 2 pieces, a short piece and a long piece. In between, in high school, roundish, too round for the athletic sporty girls with their green and gold Letterman jackets, yet not so for the round girls who banded together at round tables in the high school cafeteria. In between, smartish, not smart enough for the straight A clique, looking down their noses at we less thans, yet too smart for the cool classes of the cool kids with whom I never shared classes. In between, pretty-ish, not pretty enough for the mean girls, but also glad for it even then, yet too pretty for the nice girl set who assumed much wrongly. In between, whitish, too white to hang with the Indians and talk of aunties and root festivals, yet much too Indian inside to hang with the compassionless, hypocritical whites. In between, cowgirlish, too much the city kid to be accepted at the Mustanger grounds or in 4-H clubs, yet so much the sheep camp mountain moccasin girl that I wasn't a town kid either. In between, soulfulish, too deep for the popular crowd focused on sex, drugs, and rock and roll, yet certainly milquetoast for the gloom and doomers or the brooders and thinkers. I was in between in high school. Erasing brown eyes. The little girl with the big brown eyes didn't understand the people in her new town. Back home in Joseph and Enterprise, they revered Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce. It seemed Pendleton, Oregon, home of the world famous Pendleton Roundup, was also home of big time Indian haters. They especially hated the Cayuse Indians. In grade school, she learned Dr. John McLaughlin was the father of Oregon, that he was a former Hudson's Bay Company man and a great leader. She was taught about Joe Meek and Captain Bonneville and how they paved the way west, what famous explorers they were, and she loved learning about those times, about the Indians and the trappers and the explorers. Those lessons held her interest to the fullest. She liked to imagine what it was like a long, long time ago, before the white people came to the Wallowa Valley. She loved Chief Joseph and so wished she were Nez Perce herself. She was, however, a Assiniboine from her grandmother Ruth, her deadbeat dad's mother. Grandmother Ruth was 7/8 Assiniboine and 1/8 French. That made this little brown-eyed girl almost a quarter Assiniboine and a smidge French. A grandmother must have married a French trapper. Of course, then, she was also interested in French-Canadian history of the Hudson Bay Company in her lessons. Outside of the state-issued history books, outside of school, in downtown Pendleton, she and her friends weren't allowed to walk because of the bars. It wasn't the bars themselves, but the drunken Indians. It was often passed out on the sidewalk Indians. She'd given up asking adults for help. Pendleton was not home to compassion. She missed the kindness back home in those beautiful Wallowa Mountains. Each summer, for 6 young years, she had the gift of a lifetime. Her grandfather herded sheep for a friend in her beloved Wallowa Mountains, and as soon as school was out, she was on her way to sheep camp. 6 glorious summers, she slept in a teepee tent, wore moccasins, and rode horseback, often pretending she was Nez Perce. Sometimes she was on a vision quest, but mostly she was hunting with her homemade bow and arrow. She ran along trails and sat atop Hell's Canyon like it was an everyday thing, because in those lucky summers, it was. She spent hours watching golden eagles soar in circles, riding the currents until they disappeared. Her favorite, though, was cawing with the crows across draws and canyons. Good company. But as most girls do, she grew up. She hated high school, was so glad when it was over. She went to college and minored in anthropology with a focus on Oregon Indians. She got married, had 2 fantastic kids, and all the other usual good, bad, and ugly stuff that life throws at a person. Fast forward to almost now. A year and a half ago, she decided to distract from the pandemic horrors with an Ancestry.com renewal. She'd done the DNA test years ago with no surprises. She was proud of her 10 to 17% Assiniboine heritage. The only proof of her heritage, indeed, as her parents told her they chose not to enroll her when she was born. Maybe this international version of Ancestry would finally dig up something interesting about the Zumwalt Prairie homesteading great-great-grandparents, the Gills from Ireland. That very first day, she fired up her laptop, a cup of hot coffee nearby, and those beautiful Wallowa Mountains right outside her window. She learned not about her Irish heritage, but this. She learned this. She learned her great-great-great-grandfather, Matthew Dauphin, traveled west with Joe Meek, Captain Bonneville, and Narcissa Whitman. She learned he was the godfather of the Cayuse Five, the men hung for the murders at Whitman Mission. She learned he was an interpreter for the Nez Perce during the Treaty of 1855 negotiations. She learned her great-great-grandmother, Suzanne, Matthew's wife, was full Cayuse. Of course, Suzanne wasn't her real name. This meant she was Cayuse. Brown Eyes was Cayuse. This meant her deadbeat dad was Cayuse. Her grandmother Ruth was Cayuse, and so on. Was she even any part of Assiniboine? How could he have not told her? He gave her nothing ever. It was, as they say, the very least he could have done. It would have cost him nothing. But instead, this day, she knows, it's a lot for her to process. This meant she grew up in her homeland. This meant she minored in college in her people. This meant she might have had sex with 2 distant cousins. She chuckles now when she remembers worrying about being pregnant. As a little girl, she knew she needed to marry a man who was a quarter Assiniboine so as not to dilute our Indian heritage further. How ironic could that have been? This meant her grandfather knew Joe Meek. In school, how she would have bragged. This meant her grandfather knew Captain Bonneville. Again, relentless bragging. This meant her grandfather knew Narcissa Whitman, which, wow, wow, wow. So now that Brown Eyes was Cayuse, now it was her ancestors who were among those hung for the murders at Whitman Mission. Maybe this was why she didn't know. She would spend the next year and a half rereading books she already owned that include dozens of references to her ancestors. She purchased and read dozens more, even 4 written by her very own great plus grandfathers. Ancestors who were explorers and leaders for the Hudson's Bay Company, whose awesomeness is mentioned by Dr. John McLaughlin, Peter Ogden Skeen, and the like in their journals and memoirs. She would know of her 4th grandfather, Pierre's extraordinary feats in life through his words, the words of his contemporaries and family stories. She would learn, for example, there exists a plethora of correspondence between her grandfather, Pierre, chief trader for the Hudson's Bay Company, and his boss, Hudson's Bay Company chief factor, Dr. John McLaughlin. They were friends. After Pierre died of a tragic horse accident, John McLaughlin had his body exhumed from Fort Nez Perce, where he was the chief trader, and interned in place of honor at Fort Vancouver at the Hudson's Bay Company headquarters. She met relatives in Walla Walla and Athena with family stories galore. The only child found cousins, and when she visited them, she drove on a road built by her 3rd great-grandfather, A.D. Pambrant, also a chief trader. This road, a road she had passed hundreds of times since birth, unknowingly. She learned she went through high school with her cousin who grew up in the house that grandfather A.D. built 4 miles up this road. She would learn 3 sets of her great-grandparents knew both Chiefs Joseph, Tawatoy, Kamayakan, 5 Crows, Twisted Hair, Pio Pio Mox, Ollicott, Looking Glass, everyone she'd read about and revered. Her great-grandmothers and aunties are pictured in the allotment day photo at the Umatilla Reservation allotment day. She knows now that Chief 5 Crow's allotment was next to that of her family. She learned it meant much more that she learned it meant much more than she knew to have built a house on bare land and lived 20 years in Cove at the edge of the Grand Ronde Valley. Her ancestors were among those gathered there at every seasonal gathering, hundreds, maybe thousands of years back. She felt good knowing she raised her children there among the footsteps of those Cayuse ancestors. Sadly, she'll never know for sure why she didn't know. One thing she does know, those brown eyes are Cayuse eyes, and they will not be erased.
Did that inspire you? Well, since 1988, Fishtrap has been a place where you can bloom as a writer and connect with others too. We have a couple online writing workshops coming up I think you might enjoy. Saturday mornings in April, we have Recipes from Poems We Love, an online poetry workshop with Nellie Bridge. And Wednesday evenings in May, 2 ideas, Grappling with Paradox and Tension in Personal Essay and Memoir with Katherine Johnson. Save your spot at fishtrap.org. Okay, it's time for our second reader. Talia Filipek lives in Enterprise. Matter of fact, she just lives right over there. She ogles at the mountains with a cup of cocoa in one hand and a baby in the other arm. Growing up, Talia often visited here with her family to camp and explore. Then, as an adult, she returned to work for the U.S. Forest Service as a ranger in the Eagle Cap Wilderness and Hells Canyon Recreation Area. Her professional career has taken her all over the place, working in design and photography, outdoor education, and social sciences. But she always knew that the Wallowas would one day be her base camp. By trade, Talia captures the delight of humanity, love, untold stories, and local products with her camera. But it's in the rare, quiet times that she puts pen to paper in an attempt to decipher the things she wonders about and imagines. She wonders about and imagines. Her writing is a practice of personal reflection. Please welcome Talia Filipek.
Hi, thanks for having me. My first piece is just a reflection on a recent time I went swimming with my son, where he really loved the water. I received some positive feedback on sharing of my birth story, with John Owen, my baby, and I was encouraged to write some more. So I decided to build on the first few lines of my birth story and weave in this recent swimming experience. So this is titled Million Fish. You were born in a Rubbermaid cattle trough. You swam into the cool water like a fish and latched like a brookie. Or, some say, you came in hot like a butterball right in time for Thanksgiving dinner. And back to the water you return on this quiet, subtle afternoon. This time, teal water under the trees, the blonde wisps of your forehead, or as Mama calls them, your lady catchers, danced as the ripples rocked you nearly to slumber. A pumice stone with no apprehension, dreaming as good as drifting, drifting as good as dreaming. And it was in this moment I wonder if maybe it really was you. I harbored in the palm of my hands as a young girl, as I scooped you from a stream, ran through the waft of mock orange with socks stuffed with creek sand, poured you into a mason jar and schlepped you home to secure you in the very center of the kitchen table. Your shiny scales with my cereal box, only to soon question if guppies get lonely, and promptly scurry you all the way back, swishing, sloshing, return you to the stream, to wonder about you, pray you find home again. Will you find your family? Oh no, but here we are now. You tip your head back and surrender to the warmth, belly up to a new beginning. And this next piece is something I wrote in the wilderness. I think Toni's actually heard this one, but it's called Figure 8. And I wrote it after an encounter with a cowboy and a string of mules in the middle of a autumn storm. It was the first snowfall in the Eagle Cap, and I wanted to write about it. Figure 8. Powdered sugar hoof prints, angel lashes fall, and dust the Carhartt leather of the last cowboy's song. He rides tall through the flurry, 2 black mares close behind. He tips his hat, his lady, a grin as white as the snow, her tall, weathered, but beautiful as an antique parlor lamp. She is bright beside him, a beacon through the storm. They guide their horses, their string against the fog in the mountain ridge, a mist unexpected yet right. They pass and I follow them through the flurry, up the trail, the winter save. In my old age, I will wish once more to be walking the figure 8 during the first snowfall of autumn. It is a walk I'll take in heaven. And that's all from me.
Thanks, Talia. You can learn more about Talia's work at taliajean.com. Well, it's March and we're right in the middle of the NEA Big Read. This year, we're celebrating the novel The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. And a couple weeks back, Fishtrap's Shannon McNerney interviewed the author from her home in Mexico. And I've got to say, this is among my favorite author interviews of all time. You can watch it online at fishtrap.org. Well, before we get to our final reader, I'd like to introduce you to Fishtrap's development director, Amy Zam, who has some exciting news for you. Amy?
Thanks, Mike. Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying tonight's readings. I just wanted to pop in for a minute and give you a quick update on Fishtrap's new space. As most of you know, we have leased the historic Bowlby building on Main Street in downtown Enterprise. This gorgeous old building is currently undergoing a major renovation, and we are on track to move in this coming April. In addition to office space, our new location will include a 1,450 square foot event space where we will once again be hosting live and in-person fireside evenings. This beautiful new space will also be home to Winter Fish Trap, our big read programs, guest speaker events, and more. In addition to the main event space, the Bowlby building will also have a fully equipped kitchen and a conference room that will be ideal for writing workshops, meetings, breakout groups, and smaller gatherings. We are planning to fully furnish and equip this new space with a stage, a modern sound system, 2 big screen TVs, comfortable chairs, artwork, and everything it needs to be the perfect event venue. And this space isn't just for Fishtrap. We plan to make both the main event space and the conference room available to other groups and organizations so the whole community benefits. Last week, we announced our Bowlby fundraising campaign, and we're hoping that you can help us out. In order to create the space we envision, we need to raise just over $50,000. We recently received a matching grant from the Roundhouse Foundation. That means that every dollar you give will be matched up to $25,000. Just go to our website, fishtrap.org, click the Give tab at the top of the page, and you'll find a link to our Bowlby campaign page. By giving today, you double your donation. We hope you'll help us create a beautiful new home for Fishtrap and for the whole community. We can't wait to see you there next fall for the 10th season of Fishtrap Fireside. Back to you, Mike.
All of us at Fishtrap are excited to invite you into our new space and online again next season. All right, our final reader is Debbie Carson. Debbie was born in Philadelphia, where the Science Museum's giant heart's pulsating walls and cobwebs in its darker corners fascinated and terrified her. It took her until age 5 to finally muster up the nerve to walk through it by herself. That same year, her family moved to then rural Connecticut. She remains thankful for the quiet brook behind her house, providing a refuge for her younger years. Let's fast forward now to 1973. Debbie's art degree netted her work as a short order cook, an MIT temp, and as a transferer of dead fish from old bottles to new at Harvard's ichthyology department. Clearly, it was time for her to head west. In Eugene, a friend said, "Hey, Debbie, you want to visit a tree planting camp?" So Debbie joined the Hodad's Reforestation Co-op, making lifelong friends while earning just about zilch in planting trees. She fared better working as a U.S. Forest Service temp, but eventually returned to college. Debbie, now retired from school librarianship and teaching art, has 2 adult children, an itchy foot, and a love for being on the water. Please welcome Debbie Carson.
Greetings. Some of you may know Marika Straw. I'd like to thank them for their help in polishing up this piece, not to mention their kindness in hosting me a few years ago at their North Carolina home. Prologue. When my youngest, Marika, lived outside of Asheville, North Carolina, I went to visit them. They showed me around their local area in fine fashion, treating me at French Broad Chocolates where they worked, perusing Asheville's hole-in-the-wall stores, and dining on some very fine Indian food. When they invited me inner tubing down a very fun, but it's so muddy I can't see what's on the bottom river, I took a leap of faith that nothing unwelcome would rise out of the depths. Give me a sea clear to the bottom stream any day. Sometimes we made like tourists. At the Biltmore Mansion, we rented a narrated tour and took turns with the headphones. The narrators, acting as the help, indicated that all the servants were very fond of the Biltmores. But after trading headphones a few turns, both they and I concluded that was, at best, local folklore, or perhaps the Biltmore Board of Trustees party line. And while the mansion and grounds were incredible, they were also kind of creepy in a very, very wealthy sort of way. On our visit, what neither they nor I could figure out was the purpose of the light-ringed lake on the back road to their house. There was nothing for us two adventurers to do but figure it out. North Carolina, carpe carp. In North Carolina, paylaking pays off. Picture a 4-acre pond that, with proper management, can support up to 40,000 pounds of fat carp. Lease that pond for 3 years, pay for tanker trucks full of young carp to be delivered from the Great Lakes area, and run carp tournaments. Best legal redneck gambling around. Redneck, by the way, is what our carp acquaintances call themselves, and they said it with pride. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Driving up the back road at night, my child Marika and I saw a small lake ringed by spotlights. It looked like a lit up fairy ring, but what was it? The next evening, we stopped by to find out and were greeted by a dad and teenager. Each held a slice of pizza and sat in lawn chairs by 3 rods in holders. The dad gestured with his slice towards a pizza box. Domino's delivers, he noted, and we all laughed. Putting his pizza aside, he gave us an informal intro to competitive carp fishing, explaining how tournaments are run. Did we know that carp tournaments were both big recreation and big business? That the business part includes gambling and is legal in Georgia? Our reaction? Who could have guessed? However, we couldn't figure out why only 2 people were fishing that night. The dad guessed that both carp fishers and carp were recovering from an all-night tournament held a couple days earlier. He suggested we visit the DNR Pay Lake down the road instead. Maybe more was going on there. Before heading to the DNR the next night, we strategized. Town attire would not fit in at a pay lake. We changed into our most nondescript jeans and t-shirts, loaded up, and headed to the DNR. At the DNR, though a tournament was scheduled for that night, there were once again only 2 people there. One a fisher, and the other the DNR Pay Lake lease manager. We introduced ourselves as curious but ignorant visitors. Earl, the manager, grabbed 6 rods and holders and set them up for Marika and me. First came baiting the hooks. In a 5-gallon bucket, Earl mixed a pungent combination of cornmeal, oatmeal, water, Caro syrup, and flavoring. That's flavoring, folks. What is carp bait flavored with? Good question. Earl showed us a few of the hundreds he could choose from, but didn't tell us which he picked. Earl next put corn niblets on each jigged hook, grabbed a handful of bait, and formed a long marshmallow of bait around the hooks. Bait and hooks? Check. Earl launched each rod's baited hooks into the pond. In theory, once in the lake, the bait falls off on top of the hooks. Then in the process of eating the bait, the carp get hooked. In practice that night, though, these fish also seem to be recovering from an early all-night fishing tournament. Too bad. Had one been hooked, the line would have been zinging out of the reel. We would have been fighting hard to bring in the carp for weighing, hearts racing, with any expletives falling short of the magnitude of the rush that is carp fishing. Pay Lake carp average around 20 pounds, with some weighing up to 40. After they're weighed, they go back in the pond. This cycle leaves those fish pretty well informed about how to approach a dinner of bait. And between tournaments, they grow bigger. No wonder the carp weren't cooperating. We watched the rods and visited with Earl, who educated us on the ordering and delivery of carp from the Great Lakes area. He made it clear that the financial and logistical concerns of running a pay lake are multifaceted and continual. On the subject of supply and demand, he noted that when the Jews have that holiday, the price of carp goes wacky. Carp? Jews? I wondered. Then made the connection between Passover, gefilte fish, and, oh yeah, carp. Earl treated us to fresh grilled liver mush sandwiches served with pop. While we ate, he told how his cousin drowned in a nearby lake, recounted the history of a local hot dog stand, and recited a list of various jobs he'd held over the years. Marika and I were in unfamiliar territory, made comfortable by Earl's hospitality. Southern hospitality is one cliche. Another's redneck. I've been trained not to use the term, but redneck was how Earl described himself and the area. The town and the area were home to him and his kin. He said he moved away for a while, but came back and stayed. He knew all the stories. We heard but a fraction of them. He had no questions for us. The sun went down. A fingernail moon appeared, as did the mosquitoes. Earl went and grabbed the bug dope. Sugar, the dog, whined for attention. The rod tips remained still. Conversation ebbed. We thanked Earl and went home. Carpe carp.
Hey, thank you, Debbie, and to Talia and to Toni Marie for reading at this month's Fishtrap Fireside. You know, anybody, anywhere can take in Fireside online at fishtrap.org and on Fishtrap's YouTube channel. Join us next month with 3 more Wallowa County writers and what is likely to be the final virtual-only Fishtrap Fireside before we move to Fishtrap's new home on Main Street in Enterprise. But don't worry, we'll continue to provide an online version of the program for viewers everywhere. I hope you'll join us. We'll see you then.